So welcome to a Mainstreet Masters series presented by Mainstreet SA. I'm David West, your host, and today we're talking about the significant changes that have happened to the Philadelphia city centre over the past 30 years. Back in 1990, first impressions of the city included it was dirty, graffiti-covered streets, public environment in disarray, broken car windows, panhandling, and all sending a message that no one cares and that no one really is in charge. So how did that change over time? Today, we're talking to Mr. Paul Levy, the current board chair and immediate past CEO and president of the Centre City District Management Group and the City Development Corporation. So welcome, Paul, and congratulations on the many awards you've won for the support of the city and the growth of the city over the years.
Thank you, David, and good to see you again. Pleasure to be virtually back in Australia.
Can I ask you some of your background, how you ended up in that role? Because you, of course, you're a professor and you lecture, and how did you end up getting to that role?
Yeah, it was a little bit indirect. I mean, I wound up getting a doctorate in European history from Columbia, which I describe as a socially useless commodity at the time I got it in the 1970s, and moved here to Philadelphia then. And first became involved in helping community associations, neighborhood organizations with what was a fairly strong self-help movement within the city. I did that for 4 years, and then we had a new reform-oriented mayor get elected in 1980, and I went to work for city government for 4 years in what we call our Office of Housing and Community Development, which was largely working with neighborhood groups around affordable housing, commercial corridors, and improvement of non-downtown neighborhoods. Did that for 4 years, and then went to work for the University of Pennsylvania on their business side, which was, I had done a lot of work with city government. The university had a lot of undeveloped land that they were looking to develop, and so they valued my relationship with government. I wanted to teach myself real estate development, so it was a wonderful kind of marriage. And I worked for the University of Pennsylvania for 5 years, sort of moving a series of projects forward through design, through construction. So I really learned the construction and development business well, and did that while continuing to teach part-time at Penn. And then in 1990, the opportunity came to help organize what is today's Center City District. And I guess my background of having been involved with neighborhoods, understanding city government, but then understanding private real estate development was the mix that they were looking for, which led to my selection in that role.
Can I ask, when you had your first plans were started to be developed, how did you convince the council and the businesses and the property owners that this was a good way forward?
So the work actually started a little bit before my involvement with a series of major property owners and businesses and developers talking to city government, basically suggesting that in order for the city center to be competitive, there needed to be additional revenue spent on public space maintenance. And maybe a little bit of history of Philadelphia. We were, up through World War II, a major manufacturing center. We had a very strong garment industry. We made railroad cars, a machine tool industry. We had a very vibrant port. And then the deindustrialization of the city went on fairly strongly through the 50s and 60s. And then the American pattern of suburbanization as well led to many middle-class people moving out of the city. So the city was losing population, it was losing revenue. We did have a very successful post-industrial revitalization strategy for the city center, new office buildings, healthcare, et cetera. But on one hand, the city center was an island of renewal within a city that was still losing population and losing jobs. And then secondly, because of the great needs in neighborhoods, the city government kept appropriately saying, we need to spend money in neighborhoods. We need to spend money in declining areas. We can't afford to do extra within the city center. So we had this interesting situation of a lot of new reinvestment, but the inability of the city government to provide a level of services that enabled the city center to remain competitive. So a group of major property owners and developers began the preliminary work talking with city council. with the idea that a supplementary organization would be created. And then I was hired in March of 1990, really to begin the detailed planning work, to take it from just the idea. And the message was very simple. We needed a city center that was clean, safe, and effective. And so the focus was on building a program like that. And of course, the first reaction from many businesses when you came to this idea was, are you crazy? Why should I pay extra for additional services? I don't like the services I'm already getting. And what we had to do is shape a program that documented that what we were talking about doing was supplementing but not replacing city services. And so in our case, municipal government cleaned the roadways, they emptied the litter bins, but they did not necessarily clean the sidewalks. They didn't have responsibility for removing graffiti from building facades. And so we tailored a program of routine sidewalk sweeping, of pressure washing and graffiti removal. And then secondly, while the city provided police, what we provided was a uniformed, unarmed group of people who we called community service representatives, who we described as like a walking hotel concierge. They had a public safety function, but they had carried no weapons, had no use of force, but they were out there to be a friendly presence. But with two-way radio, we were connected back into a police substation that was built right within our offices. So we were eyes and ears for the police, but also a walking hotel concierge to greet shoppers, to greet visitors, and to create a welcoming presence. And in many ways, the message was, you see this happening in all of our suburban shopping centers and all of our suburban office parks. They were well-managed places. And our city center was now competing with much better managed places outside the city center. So again, the first reaction was, this doesn't make sense. But that as we explained to people what the routine services would be, how it would be supplementary, and how it would be private sector led, but with support of the local authority. It wasn't an either or, it wasn't us against them, but it was a recognition that city government simply couldn't provide the level of services that were required. It took probably 6 or 7 months, nonstop meetings with community and business groups, answering lots of questions, and then we had a voting process. And the state enabling legislation under which we were created had a negative vote, in which the initiative was deemed approved unless a third of the owners or a third of the assessed value of real estate objected. And when we went through an extensive outreach process, we only had 11% of the owners and 10% of the assessed value object. So most people said, this makes sense. There were people who were critics, but I will tell you, the next time we were up in front of the public for approval 5 years later, we had 1% of the property owners object. And it's been that way ever since, because key to what we started with was highly visible public services that people could see. Our sidewalk cleaners were in a very bright and distinctive teal uniform. Our public safety people were in a uniform. And so people could see, feel, and touch what we were doing. It wasn't invisible long-term economic development trends and strategies. It was very much here and now effects that you can see right away.
So I know usually when people come up with new ideas, there's going to be businesses that will object and property owners that object. How did you convince them? Did they say, look, let's look at it and see what happens over the 5 years and then we'll reconsider, or did they still objected?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we had together a board of directors that was very representative of the cross section of businesses. We had major property owners, we had major tenants, we had retailers, we had hotel general managers. So when people looked at the board of directors, they saw a mirror that they were in. They'd say, all right, I understand that individual is a hotel general manager. If I'm in the hospitality industry, he or she will understand my perspective. So one was a very careful structuring of the board. Two, these jobs become nonstop. I mean, I was working a 7-day week, basically. And I tell people my retirement today is I've gone from a 7-day work week to a 4-day work week. But you need to be constantly responding. Everyone expects services immediately, and we committed to provide that. So again, skepticism the first time round, around 11% objecting, but in each subsequent reauthorization, and we do this every 5 years, we haven't been over 1% in the last 25 years. So I think the proof is in the effectiveness and the visibility of the services.
Yeah. So in the initial parts, of course, you talked about the cleaning and the safety, getting that right. So when did you start to move into sort of more of the marketing and events programs?
Right. And that actually was about 18 months afterwards. We organized, we were a city that people obviously came into on Friday and Saturday evening for arts and culture and entertainment. But most weeknights, the city closed down at 5:30 p.m. And so we decided, at the request of a lot of retailers and restaurants, to pick one night a week that we could promote that businesses would stay open. And we initially called it the Make It a Night campaign. We persuaded the majority of restaurants and retailers to stay open till 8 p.m. But then we did extensive advertising on radio, in print. We hired musicians to be out on the corners of various major retail establishments, and we did a lot of publicity. So there was a lot of, Center City is coming alive, and just to see the crowds. And of course, this was pre-social media, but in those days, television. We got great television coverage, and we sought it as well. And people said, look, lots of things are happening. Restaurants quickly reported our dinner sales were great. Retailers said it was worth staying open. And so we started with a very modest objective. We weren't trying to change market trends in the region. We were trying to get people to stay in town after work or come in one night a week. And we've built from that. So it is now obviously a 7-day-a-week economy. Now, at the same time, the city opened a major convention center in 1994. We began to see a dramatic increase in hotels. We opened new arts and cultural institutions in the city center. So there were many more reasons for people to be here besides just work and shopping. And I think that's a key strategy that we were part of. We weren't necessarily the people who led it, but we worked very closely with the city, diversifying the downtown economy, more than just office buildings, more than just hotels. And then by 1997, I know we'll talk about this, a dramatic focus on increasing a downtown residential population, apartments and condominiums, so that our city center now, every block has hotels and office buildings and residential towers. And the more diversified the real estate, the more vital a city.
Yes, of course, that's a really big topic in Adelaide City as well, is talking about residential in the CBD and trying to grow that. How did you get across some of the barriers where you had a very old historic building, which then needed some conversion, because it needed a lot of work done on fire exits and things like that?
Yeah, and it's obviously a problem that every city is facing today, with a lower return to office and a lot of inventory of older buildings. We see that in England, we see that in the States as well. What we did is, we were an older historic city. As you know, we have colonial architecture from the 18th and early 19th century. But we were a very robust industrial city, as I said. So our city center had wonderful buildings from the 1890s, 1900, 1910, that were effectively obsolete as office buildings. They had been supplanted by buildings built in the 70s and 80s. And as you said, the code really didn't quite apply. We hired an architect who specialized in looking at these buildings. We actually published a report called Turning on the Lights Upstairs, which was what were the various code modifications you could seek within the current law to convert a vacant office or industrial building to residential use. But then a key lever, our state law allows a form of tax abatement under certain conditions. And so as a city, we worked and helped write with our mayor at the time a 10-year tax abatement for the conversion of any vacant office or industrial building to residential or hotel use. And the real estate taxes were abated for 10 years. So we both provided a guide on how to convert these buildings and then a financial incentive, which was just remarkable. We have converted within our city center about 50 to 60 million, 50 to 60 major buildings, 30 to 40 million square feet of office space is now hotel or residential or apartments. And that's been hugely successful. And then that was 1997. And then in 2000, we extended that tax abatement for new construction of residential. So we began to get new apartment buildings and new condominium buildings built as well. So that goes to my previous point. We dramatically diversified land use in the downtown, which obviously helped the retail industry, the restaurant industry. But one other thing that we've seen, and we've seen this across the states and also in Europe post-COVID, which is that among the people who live within 3 miles of our city center, 92% of them are back in the office 4 to 5 days a week. People who live 10 miles away or more are back at 55% at this point. We see that across the United States. So proximity, ease of walking to work has reinforced the commercial office sector for us as well. So that not only drives retail and restaurants, it reinforces the commercial office sector, which has been a real benefit for us.
Oh, that's excellent. And in South Australia, we actually haven't done too bad. We're sort of sitting around 85%. Now we're starting to get people back, but it's slowly turning. And so we're looking forward to a positive future. Can I ask you about one of your successful homelessness programs that you would have put in place?
Yeah, like a lot of American cities, I'm not sure what the conditions are today in Australia. We had a significant number of mentally ill and addicted people who were on our streets, people without resources or home. And while the city had many programs, the city center started to become a place where it wasn't a neighborhood where people would say, look, I don't want you on my sidewalk. It was more anonymous. And so we began to get more and more people, camping in alleyways or lying on sidewalks or panhandling. And we had this kind of extreme debate of one group saying, call the police and arrest them. And other people saying, until we have enough housing for everybody, we can't do anything at all. And part of what I think these city center management organizations do well is they look for the practical middle ground. We didn't need to win an ideological war over who was right. We need to help people come off the street. And I developed a very good relationship with a former nun, Sister Mary Scullion, who had led a wonderful program called Project Home. She had started with homeless outreach and then built an entire inventory of housing for people in need. So a real patron saint, if you will, of helping people in need. And she was doing outreach to people on the street, but they were encountering a lot of people who were frankly threatening, people who might not be the safest people to deal with. And Sister Mary and I got together and essentially invented a program to which she gave the name Ambassadors of Hope. What we do is partner her outreach workers, who are trained social workers, with a group of crisis intervention trained police officers who have been trained to deal with mentally ill or addicted people on the street. We committed our own staff who were trained. So we had teams of 3 individuals, one a police officer, one a social service worker, and one of our ambassadors, each of whom would work together as a team. And what we quickly found is that somebody on the street in an extreme state of mind might relate well to somebody in uniform. They might not like someone in uniform. So effectively, the teams would figure out who knows this person best. So one was establishing relationships. The second key part of this is our city's outreach program never had enough resources to transport people. So if somebody said, listen, I'm willing to come in to shelter, it might take 45 minutes for a van to come pick them up. And by that time, they changed their mind. So we committed and we fund a van that is dedicated to transport someone. So the minute someone says, I'm willing to come in and seek help, we can have a van there in 5 minutes. And then what Sister Mary and Project Home arranged is a series of beds that were available immediately. So if someone agreed on the street to come in, we transport them not to an anonymous intake center, but to a full service center where they could get shelter, food, as well as whatever medical or healthcare services they need. So in the States, we call this a co-service delivery model in which you blend different disciplines together. And if somebody's in serious at risk of harming someone, there are police there. Police almost never need to act, but it's reassuring to some of the outreach workers. And it also, somebody doesn't accept help, the police can say, you've been offered help, you can no longer block this doorway. So it's a balance between using public safety and enforcement without arresting anyone, without criminalizing, but setting these are the standards you must conform to. We're offering you help. And it's been extremely successful for us as a city. We have not solved the problem. And each time, unfortunately, some new addictive drug appears in the city, we have a different group of people, but we now have a response mechanism, and particularly for a retail or a restaurateur who calls and says, there's somebody blocking my doorway, we can have someone there right away. So again, the ability to provide immediate response to problems and providing solutions is, I think, one of the really great things business improvement districts can do.
Yep, amazing. I was going to say, just flowing on then to the nighttime economy, of course. So what are some of the strategies you've used with the nighttime economy? Because it's so important.
Right. So again, a business improvement district doesn't act in isolation, but we worked through our development cooperation on plans to improve what we call our Avenue of the Arts, which is where our performing arts organizations are, the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, which has the Rodin Museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, a Calder Museum. So we were very much part of helping plan to recruit or grow cultural institutions, theaters within the downtown, so that we would have many more attractions. As I also said, in 1994, we opened a major convention center. We've added 50 major hotels in the downtown. Again, the improvement district didn't do that, but we were part of a collaborative effort to attract diverse economic uses to the city center so that, pre-pandemic, the city was busy 7 nights a week, whether it was arts and culture, whether it was theater, or whether it was people coming to conventions, and the foot traffic out on the street was extremely high. And we're largely recovered. We're back to about overall an 87% recovery rate, in which we have 20% more residents than we had in 2019. Our visitor levels are back up at around 91 or 92%, and our overall worker rate is around 77%. So they balance out. We're not really completely where we want to be with workers, but we're moving in that direction at this point. I think the other thing that we did was we financed through the improvement district a series of major capital improvements, landscaping, pedestrian scale lighting, so that we not only had roadway fixtures that lit the roadway, we have pedestrian scale fixtures on nearly every street in the city center, directories. So we financed improvements to the public environment beyond just clean and safe, just to create a welcoming environment, well lit, good directional signs, good landscaping. We've done a lot of landscaping of sidewalks. We're adding lots of bike lanes within our city center. Rather than just have, pillars there, we've got planters in the street to help demarcate bicycle lanes as well. So again, moving from clean and safe to promoting an evening economy to then financing capital improvements. And then we have built and managed 5 parks within the city center now. We've raised money from state and federal sources. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is once we've had the track record of proving we can do A, B, and C, we're able to go secure federal money or state money or local charitable foundations. And so, for example, Dilworth Park is a major park on the west side of our city hall. This is a $65 million renovation, which is a gateway to our transit system. We manage that park. We manage a children's park. We manage a couple of small little pocket parks in other parts of the city. And so clean and safe streetscape improvements, marketing, and then actual management and programming of public spaces has become the full array of what we do. And I guess to put in perspective, when we started, it was a $6.5 million US organization. It's now $32 million a year. And that's largely assessment revenue coming not from raising rates, but just the added value in the city center, new office buildings, new apartment buildings, new hotels. There's simply more real estate. So we don't charge people more per property. We just have that many more properties contributing to the improvement district, which has enabled us to do so much more.
Well, that's fabulous. And, I've been to Philadelphia a few times, of course, and it's where I
Right.
first had my exposure to improvement districts. And, it was an amazing city, and I was just stunned. And I remember one of your mantras, Paul, was about when working on programs with main streets and city centres was to tell people what you're going to do, be really clear, then do it, but then make sure that you follow up and actually say that you did it. And I think that's one area we sometimes fall down, is that we don't follow up and say, here's what happened. And yes, it can be improved, or yes, it was fantastic.
Yeah, and we all have, not simply from age maybe, but all of us have short-term memories, right? With social media, everybody's paying attention to the next thing, and you do need to continue to remind people. So, we started with things like newsletters, but now we're very active on social media, constantly communicating about events, putting out the result of events. And you have to be your own publicity arm now, because the media is now much more fragmented than it used to be. Our newspapers have lower circulation. Right now in the United States, TV is dominated only with the national election. There's nothing else happening. And so how you get a message out, is you need to communicate. So absolutely. And again, it ties back to where we started from: visibility. It's not me saying something, or Prima, who now runs the day-to-day operations, saying something. It's our staff visible on the street. It's programming in parks. It's signs being repaired. People see people in our uniforms all the time, tending to the quality of the public environment.
Yep. No, that's a fantastic program. And I think, it's been just a leader in the world of city centres about the way you've taken it where it's gone. So thank you so much, Paul, for your time. It's just been absolutely fabulous to interview and talk to you, a privilege for me as well. And we thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back down and visit. So I'll find my way that way there very, very soon. And good luck with your work, David.
Thank you.